Hi guys, thanks for visiting my channel. Today we're going to be talking refrigerator pickles. They're so good and really easy to do. In my last video on the pimento cheese spread that I made, I did jazz mine up by adding a couple of tablespoons of my Zesty bread and butter pickles, and you guys seem to show an interest in learning how to do those. So that's the inspiration for today's video. But I'm not going to just make the Zesty bread and butter ones for you. We're also going to make some dill pickles, so stick around for the whole video so that you can see both versions. Now, according to Ball, they have in their the all new Ball book of canning and preserving book. You guys know I like this book. We've canned quite a few things out of it, but they also have other sections in here for fermenting, drying, freezing, and things that you can pickle in the refrigerator, so or preserve using your refrigerator. So they do have a section in here on refrigerator pickles in 4 easy steps, and they give you a master brine recipe and they walk you through the steps to do it. It's really simple to do. They even include 4 different recipes for you. I'm not going to stick to their exact recipe. I am going to use the master brine recipe for the dill ones. I've ad-libbed a little bit for the Zesty bread and butter pickles because they do not include a recipe in here for bread and butter or sweet pickles, so I kind of ad-libbed. But with refrigerator pickles, it's really nice because it's not like canning. There are very few rules to follow, and as a matter of fact, they make a disclaimer at the bottom of the page: create your own globally inspired refrigerator pickles. Just customize your pickles in the master brine recipe with guidance from the recipe chart above. Because these are refrigerator pickles, you can feel safe to experiment by adjusting or varying ingredients as desired. So there really aren't any rules when it comes to refrigerator pickles. The only thing that I would say, because if you look on Pinterest for refrigerator pickles, people are all over the place with how much vinegar to use. Some brines require vinegar and water. Some recipes I don't think use enough vinegar. So I'm going to go with what Ball has in here as my guide, because according to Ball, and I did say this in my video, I said that they would last in the refrigerator 2 months. Ball is claiming they will last up to 3 months in your refrigerator, but I really think you need to make sure you're using enough vinegar if you're going to keep them that long in your fridge. So we're just going to basically use the guidelines for their master brine, and I feel totally confident in keeping my pickles in my refrigerator for up to 3 months. And they also state that there are a lot of things that you can pickle. You can use just about any vegetable: asparagus, bell peppers, tomatoes, green beans, carrots, cauliflower, green tomatoes, onions, mushrooms, eggplant, radishes. The list goes on and on. So you can pretty much, just about any vegetable you can pickle. So you're not limited to that, which I think is really great. You can use just about any type of spice or seasoning that you would like, and you can even vary your vinegar. You just need to make sure that it's 5% acidity. So just check the label, make sure it's 5% acidity, and you can use any vinegar you choose. So I think that that's really great. And the advantage to refrigerator pickles, in my opinion, is that they're so much more crisp than a canned pickle. Now, I do take some steps to get my canned pickles as crisp as possible. If you watched my video on my Zesty bread and butter pickles, I do the salt and ice water bath for a number of hours before we make them, and that does really help with the crunchiness of them. But we're not going to do that for our refrigerator pickles, so it's really not necessary. And because you're not cooking them at all, they really don't lose much crunch, and they're really delicious. So without further ado, let's get started. I've started by cutting up my veggies. Now, I'm pretty much sticking to my recipe for my Zesty bread and butter pickles that I canned. I wanted to replicate those in a refrigerator version for you, so I pretty much stuck to that recipe. The one thing I do want to mention about cucumbers is you do want to try and use pickling cucumbers. They pickle a lot better than a regular cucumber, a slicing or a garden cucumber. I don't know. I've not tried that because all the recipes say to use pickling cucumber. However, my mom always did a vinegar and water and sugar solution with regular cucumbers and onions. I just don't know that they would keep their texture for the 3 months. So I'm using pickling cucumbers, and then I just slice them in about 1/4 inch slices. I've got 1 banana pepper, and I've sliced it. Remove the membrane and the seeds. I've sliced it into about 1/4 inch slices. I have 1 jalapeno that I've removed the membrane and the seeds and sliced in 1/4 inch slices. If you like a lot of heat, you can go ahead and leave the seeds and the membranes in there. It's not a big deal. And then we're adding garlic. I just took the paper off and cut my garlic cloves in half, and I have about 6 cloves of garlic. And then about 1/4 onion that I've sliced. And then I have both red and green bell pepper that I've just chunked. But it's entirely up to you. You don't have to slice things. You can quarter, you can chunk them, you can leave them whole if you have small cucumbers. There's so much versatility here that you can do just about anything you want. So size is not important. But that's just for reference. That is what I'm doing for these pickles. So we're going to set all that aside and we're going to make our brine. Now for our brine, we're going to use 2 cups of cider vinegar. And to that, we are going to add 1 cup of sugar. Now I know that that is a lot of sugar, but bread and butter pickles are sweet and you're not drinking the brine, so you're not getting all that sugar, but you need that much sweetness to have a true bread and butter pickle. So a cup of vinegar, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat on. And now we're going to start adding some seasonings. We need a tablespoon of canning and pickling salt. If you're not familiar, this is what you want. You don't want iodized salt or any salt that has anything added to it. Canning and pickling salt is very pure, so I highly recommend that you use that. And we're going to use 1 tablespoon. This recipe, by the way, will make 1 quart or 2 pint jars. So we've got our apple cider vinegar, our sugar, 1 tablespoon of canning and pickling salt. We need 2 teaspoons of yellow mustard seeds. You want the seeds. And I'll make sure to write all this in the description for you so you don't have to remember any of it. And this is a 2 teaspoon measure. So we want 2 teaspoons of yellow mustard seed and 2 teaspoons of crushed red pepper flakes. And then we want 1/2 teaspoon of tumeric, and 1/2 teaspoon of celery seed. And then we're going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. Now, I want to say all of this is adjustable to taste. You can leave stuff out. You can add more of something. Like I said, there are no rules. So if you want to add some seasoning that you like, that you think would taste good in your pickles, by all means add it. You can also buy pickling spice with the spices already mixed together. That's totally fine to use that. As a matter of fact, that's one of the recommendations from Ball, is to use that spice. So it's entirely up to you. There are no rules. So you get to do whatever you want and whatever sounds good to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat that up on a medium heat and let it come to a boil, and we're going to let it boil for about 3 minutes until your sugar and your salt are dissolved. Okay guys, my vinegar, I brought it up to a nice simmer. I know I used the word boil, and that's the word that they use in the Ball canning book. It doesn't really need to boil, and certainly not boil hard. You just want to bring it up to a nice simmer. You want those flavors to really infuse into your vinegar, and you want to make sure your salt and your sugar are totally dissolved. So while that's finishing up, I do want to talk about the cucumber, because there is an important aspect of this. There are two ends of your cucumber. There is the stem end, which is where it broke off the stem, and then the other end is the blossom end. Now you need to make sure you remove the blossom end. The blossom end carries enzymes that can make your cucumbers mushy and soft, and we don't want that. So you never want to leave that end on. If you want to leave the stem end on, you can. I typically cut both off, that way I'm covered either way. So I know it can be a little bit confusing if you're not real familiar with cucumbers, but you can tell the stem end is usually a little bit bigger than the blossom end. So definitely make sure you remove the blossom end. So that's that. Our brine should be ready. Now, I did not sterilize my jar. I don't really feel that I need to, and Ball doesn't say anything about doing that, and some pickling recipes say to, some don't address it at all. I just have a really nice clean jar. The one thing that Ball does state is that it should be a hot jar. So I'm gonna heat mine. And the reason being, you're gonna pour hot brine into your jar. If your jar is not hot, also, you run the risk of thermal shock and cracking your jar, and we don't want that. So I just run my jar under hot water and let it heat up for a couple of seconds. Kind of like I do when I'm canning. If you've watched any of my canning videos, you know I keep my jars hot with a sink of hot water. So we're just gonna heat it a little bit. And then I always put it on a towel or something like that, a pot holder or something, just because I have granite countertops and they can be cold, and I don't want to shock my jar. So we are going to stuff our jar. You really want to pack in as much as you possibly can with our veggies. So we're going to tightly pack our vegetables. So really maneuver them and push them down inside of there. I used about 6 cucumbers, but it'll vary depending on the size of your cucumbers. I had both small ones and some larger ones, and I had about 6 of them. And then I told you the amounts of everything else. So we're gonna shove them down in there pretty tight. And then we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon, because I have a quart jar, we're going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of Pickle Crisp granules. Hopefully you can read that okay. This is a product from Ball. It is calcium chloride. And what this is going to do is help keep your pickles crispy. And the label does say that the Pickle Crisp granules eliminate the need for pickling lime and the cumbersome, time-consuming pre-soak process. And you know, if you watched my canning video on the Zesty bread and butter pickles, I did do the pre-soak in the salt and ice water bath. This eliminates the need for that. So we're going, and you can use that either for refrigerator pickles or for regular pickles. We've got a quart jar here, so I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoon. If you were doing the recipe with the 2 pint jars, you would want 1/8 teaspoon in each jar. So I think you can see everything okay. I've got everything packed down in there. I put my granules in there, lost a pepper, push them down real well. And then we're going to take our funnel and we're going to carefully pour our hot brine into our jar. And I'm suspecting we're probably going to have a tiny bit left over. And we do. And my jar, yes, is really full. But as they settle, that will all fit down inside of there. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to set this jar aside. And we're going to let it sit until it comes to room temperature. Once it's to room temperature, you can put the lid on it and stick it in your fridge. Now, Ball states that you get the best flavor after you let your pickles sit for about a month. And I think that that's true with the dill or some other seasonings. And even with these, they obviously get better the longer that they sit. But honestly, you can eat these after they've sat in the refrigerator overnight, 12 hours or so. They taste really delicious. I did not wait a month to eat mine. So I'm gonna go ahead, set these guys aside, let them get all settled, and get my ingredients ready for my dill pickles. And when we come back, I'm gonna show you how to make those. Okay guys, we're back. We are going to do dill pickles now. But how easy was that? Refrigerator pickles are so easy and they're so good. They will change your life, I promise. So anyway, moving on to the dill pickles. We're going to use the master brine from the ball canning book that I showed you. And they start out for dill pickles, they want you to use 2 cups of vinegar. Turn my heat on. And then we're going to use 1 cup of water. Now, a word about your water, either use tap water or filtered water. They recommend not using well water because it can take on the flavor of whatever is in your well. So just make sure you're using softened water when you add it to a pickling recipe. And again, I'm going to just use pickles or cucumbers, my pickling cucumbers, but you can add any vegetable you want dilled. I know a lot of people like the green beans dilled and a whole host of other veggies dilled. I'm just going for cucumbers today, but feel free to use whatever veggies that you want. So the vinegar, water, and then for our spices, we need a tablespoon of the pickling and canning salt. And then we need 2 tablespoons of sugar. And again, the sugar and the salt, the water and the vinegar, that is the master brine recipe. The rest of the seasonings I'm going to add were just what I chose to add to my dill pickles. The flavor profile I'm going for is to try to duplicate a Clausen dill pickle, the kind you get at the grocery store in the refrigerator section. So I'm going to try to replicate that today. And one of the ingredients, as I was researching recipes, is they use the dried minced onion. So we're going to add some of that. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of the dried minced onion. Well, actually, I'm just going to add 1. Sorry. 1 tablespoon of the dried minced onion, and then we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of whole cloves. 1/2 teaspoon of whole allspice. If you're not familiar with those, they look almost like peppercorns. They're little berries, allspice berries. We're going to use 1/2 teaspoon of those. And then I'm also going to use 1/2 teaspoon of black peppercorns. So again, we're going to bring that up to a nice simmer and let it simmer for 3 minutes to make sure the sugar and the salt is dissolved. And then we're going to do the same thing, pack our jar, and I'll show you what I'm going to use for the dill part. So we'll be back when we're ready with our brine. Okay guys, we're back. My brine is simmering, so we're going to get ready to pack our jar. Now, I just went ahead and filled my jar with some hot water, and it's been heating up while my brine has been simmering. So I've got a nice hot jar going. Now for the dill part, the recipe in the ball canning book calls for 4 sprigs of dill. And there are a couple different things you can do. These guys are sprigs. This guy is a head of dill. So if you are not familiar, if you go looking for this in your grocery store where your fresh herbs are, you want to look for pickling dill. That's what this is, and they come in really long stems, and then you have the heads, and you also have the sprigs. So, and you can also find smaller, and I'm guessing this is why Ball recommended using sprigs, because in the small clamshell fresh herb containers, you can get the dill sprigs and just very few of them. If you buy pickling dill, it comes in a big bunch, and I'm going to be making more dill pickles. So if you're making several batches of dill pickles, you can go for the bigger pickling dill. If you are just going to make a batch or 2 and you just need a few sprigs of dill, I would just buy the little clamshell guys. But fresh dill is totally amazing. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to use a whole head of dill, and I'm going to use a few sprigs, and I'm going to put those in the bottom of my jar. So I cut off my head of dill, and we're going to go ahead and put him in the bottom of the jar. And we're going to throw in a few sprigs for good measure. Now, this should go without saying. You want to make sure all your vegetables have been well cleaned, and your herbs also have been fully rinsed, free of debris and dirt, rinsed and dried. So that's what I got in the bottom of my jar. Then we're going to add the Pickle Crisp granules. And again, I'm doing a quart jar, so I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon. And then we're going to pack in our pickles. Now these are, again, pickling cucumbers that we're hiding. Look how big those got. So I quartered these, but you could have them, you could leave them whole if you want to, whatever you want. So we're going to pack those down in our jar. And I probably cut too many. I cut 3, but they were big, so I'm not sure I'm going to get them all to fit in here. But we'll try. You want to pack them in there as tightly as you can. Slide them down in there. Let's see if we can fit one more in there. Yeah, that guy's not going to fit. And then I have, again, we love garlic, so I have 4 large cloves of garlic that I just removed the paper and cut in half. So we're going to put, oops, oh, I lost one. Oh well. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put our brine over the top. And again, we are going to let that sit until it's room temperature, and then I'm going to put the lid on and stick them in the fridge. But I wanted to show you the bread and butter ones. They're almost cool enough to go ahead and refrigerate, but see how beautiful those are. And I know you saw how I really overfilled it and packed them in, but you can see if you look really closely that there is brine all the way to the top. So I'm so excited about these. They are so, so good. I promise, it's life-changing and so simple. Now, just another word about your cucumbers. If you purchase them in the grocery store, sometimes they can have a wax coating on them, so you need to make sure you wash them really, really well. But if you've got the space, it's really the best if you can grow them in your own little space in a container or a garden or a flower bed. They're just so good homegrown, or you can get them from your homegrown from your farmer's market. Those are really the best. But in a pinch, I have used pickling cucumbers from the grocery store, and they are really delicious. And the nice thing is, when you live in areas where you can't garden all year, like we live in Ohio, obviously I can't have a garden all year long. If you can find pickling cucumbers, which my Meyer typically has pickling cucumbers almost all year long, when you get a hankering for some refrigerator pickles, now I keep some on hand, obviously, because I can, but before I was a canner, I did make refrigerator pickles, and it's so delicious in the dead of winter. If you can go to your grocery store, find some fresh pickling cucumbers, some fresh herbs, and make a jar of refrigerator pickles instead. So good. So I hope you'll give it a try. I hope I've clarified everything for everyone. I think when I mentioned the zesty bread and butter pickles in my pimento cheese video, I kind of confuse people with the difference between the refrigerator pickle recipe and my canning recipe. But now I have both, and you can choose and do what's best for you. So thanks so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. I'll make sure I list everything for you in the description section. So hopefully I can make everything clear for you, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.